A very good evening and welcome to this Sunday's edition of Newsfirst Weekend, coming to you live from our Newsfirst studios in Colombo. I'm Arundhati Mudanayaka. Let's start off with a look at the stories making headlines. Narendra Modi assures that India's trust towards Sri Lanka has not changed in any way. Ceylon Electricity Board to pay salaries by going against a court order. Opposition charges that the executive and the legislature are in a conflict with the Parliamentary Special Committee. Farmers face difficulties when government fails to fulfill the promises made regarding the destruction of the Sena caterpillar menace. Former Sports Minister Navendra Sanayaka expresses his stance on cricket. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who arrived in the island for a visit, held bilateral discussions with President Maithripala Sirisena at the President's house in Colombo. Prime Minister Modi is the first international leader to visit Sri Lanka following the April 21st attacks.
The discussions began after the Indian Prime Minister was ceremoniously received at the Presidential Secretariat. President Sirisena expressed his gratitude to the Indian Prime Minister for visiting Sri Lanka at a time when the country is reeling under the terrible terrorist attacks, thus giving a positive signal to the world about Sri Lanka's secure environment. According to the President's media division, President Sirisena said that the visit also reflects the strength and trust that exists between the two neighbours. The President also said that the visit also would be useful to promote Sri Lanka's economic, trade and tourism development. Prime Minister Modi said the responsibility of friendly and brotherly countries is to help each other when one faces difficulties. He noted that India's trust towards Sri Lanka has not changed in any way. Since both Sri Lanka and India have been victims of terrorism, both the leaders condemned terrorism in all its forms and manifestations and decided to step up cooperation in this critical area. The head of state presented a replica of the Samadhi statue placed in Mahameonava, Anuradhapura. This was the second state visit made by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi following his swearing in as the Indian Prime Minister for the second time. The Indian Premier arrived in the island this morning with a delegation of 59. He was welcomed by his Sri Lankan counterpart Ranil Wickremesinghe at the Bandaranaike International Airport. A group including Minister Sajith Premadasa and Deputy Minister Ashok Abesinghe and officials of the Foreign Ministry were present to welcome the Indian Prime Minister. Minister Sajith Premadasa was the minister in attendance who accompanied Prime Minister Modi throughout his tour. Earlier this afternoon, upon his arrival, Indian Prime Minister Modi visited the St. Anthony's Shrine in Kochikade to pay respect to lives lost in the April attacks. The Prime Minister was accompanied by the Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjith, among others. President Maithripala Sirisena welcomed the Indian Prime Minister, who arrived at the Presidential Secretariat amidst heavy rain.
In India, a few days ago.
A gun salute by the Sri Lankan military was also accorded to the visiting Prime Minister. Newsfirst special coverage on the Indian Prime Minister's visit to Sri Lanka was broadcast on the rooftop of the Kingsbury Hotel in Colombo. Afterwards, the visiting Prime Minister planted a tree sapling to mark his third visit to Sri Lanka. President Sirisena hosted a luncheon in honour of the visiting Indian Prime Minister. The Indian Prime Minister left the island from the Bandaranaike International Airport.
Before leaving the island today, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi met with the leader of the opposition Mahinda Rajapaksa and leader of the Tamil National Alliance R. Sampanthan.
Issuing a message on Twitter, the Indian Premier noted that during his meeting with the leader of the opposition, he discussed the need to have strong bilateral relations in eradicating terrorism to strengthen security affairs and economic development. Meanwhile, the Indian Prime Minister also met with the leader of the TNA, R. Sampanthan. Speaking to Newsfirst, R. Sampanthan said that during their meeting, he reiterated the need for India to intervene in the future to find a solution to the national issue.
Meanwhile, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the Maldivian Parliament last night. This was his first official state visit after being elected as the Prime Minister of India for the second time. According to a statement made by the Premier in the parliamentary premises, terrorism backed by state patronage is the greatest threat the present world is facing.
The Premier addressed the Maldivian Parliament last night in his first official visit overseas after being elected as the Prime Minister of India for the second time.
Neighborhood first.
Our policy is to put our neighboring countries first. The bond between India and the Maldives has taken place since the earliest civilizations. Terrorists do not own banks. They do not own businesses. Therefore, how are they receiving all this money? Who is aiding them? Terrorism backed by state patronage is the greatest threat the present world is facing. The time is right for the world leaders to get in line to eradicate extremism and terrorism. This is the best time to hold a global dialogue to eradicate terrorism. Everyone in the world should unite to start a battle against terrorism.
सबसे बड़ा खतरा बना हुआ.
During his visit, Prime Minister Modi was also honoured with the Order of Nishanuddin, a prestigious award given by the government of Maldives. 6 bilateral agreements between the two countries were signed during the visit, including introducing a radar system to monitor the Maldivian coastal lines, providing a radar system to the Maldivian National Defence Force, a trade agreement and an agreement to transport passengers via the sea.
Many views were expressed on Speaker Kharuja Surya's response to the statement made by President Maithripala Sirisena regarding the special committee appointed to inquire into the April 21st attacks.
On Friday, speaking to senior police officers, President Maithripala Sirisena said he does not approve the activities of the Parliamentary Special Committee. President also noted that he will not produce any officer attached to the security forces in active duty before the Parliamentary Special Committee. However, issuing a communique last evening, Speaker Kharuja Surya noted that it is impossible to agree on certain comments made by the head of state. The communique says that state officials cannot refuse when Parliament summons them.
There is a huge issue between the executive and the legislature. The Parliamentary Special Committee is acting on political agendas. Speaker Kharuja Surya asks to be prepared to face the consequences if the President doesn't let the security forces be a part of the proceedings. He gave this answer. When questions were raised as to how ethical is it to have Ravi Karunanayake as a committee member of the Special Committee, we clearly say that Speaker Kharuja Surya will go down in history as the Speaker who violated parliamentary democracy. You should be ready to face the upcoming power revolution during the next few months. First, the president appointed a commission. Then a special committee was appointed intersecting that. We can clearly see what's happening. Trying to create political tensions aiming the forthcoming elections will pose a threat to national security. Politicians must let the security forces do their job and stay away from investigations. Now there is a tussle between the president and the parliament. Ranil Wickremesinghe is not an infant to not understand these matters. When a presidential commission is already in place, why did they appoint a special committee? It was done to create a conflict. Recently at the special committee, MP Sumandirun himself questioned the officers who were named by him to be punished, targeting the Geneva resolution. The investigators who conduct investigations on the bond scam are now forced to answer the cross questions raised by Ravi Karunanayake. What is this joke? There is a clash between the executive, legislature and the judiciary at a time where the country is facing immense pressure. It is evident that the country is collapsing. Now the cabinet has been partially sent on leave, and the president has announced after chairing the cabinet meetings he will not assist the activities of the cabinet. This government cannot continue further. The best option is for everyone to get together and pass a resolution to hold the general election, so the people can choose their leadership in a democratic manner.
Up next is a look at Action TV.
Action TV on a prior occasion reported on how the Ceylon Electricity Board has acted neglecting the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka, which is the regulatory body of the CEB, its supply and maintenance. It was also reported that on the 3rd of this month, CEB has acted neglecting the judiciary as well. This problematic decision has been reached at a board meeting of the CEB. The decision has been conveyed to the General Manager of the CEB through a letter by the Chairman of the CEB. A document could be presented before the Cabinet in the near future based on this letter, seeking approval for the payment of salaries to a group of approximately 1,000 engineers and other employees attached to the CAB until the year 2021, based on a salary scheme which has been cancelled by the Court of Appeal. This particular salary scheme that has been cancelled by the judiciary is brought in through the back door and put into effect from January of 2015. This is done on the day of the presidential election on the 8th of January 2015. In addition, in September of 2017, a unified service is introduced covering another set of employees of the CEB, and a new salary scheme is introduced. That was clearly an effort to douse the situation that arose through the objection of the employees against the backdoor salary scheme that was introduced for the engineers, going against due process. As per the appeal court decision granted on the 2nd of April, that unified service is no longer a valid service. Though this was not ordered by the judiciary, Action TV reiterates that the salaries that were granted to the engineers under the backdoor salary scheme from 2015 until March 2019 and the salaries granted to those who were receiving it for a fake service should be earned back simply because the CEB is not a charity. With the court decision being delivered regarding this, the engineers and those who were engaged in the service created by not following due process have received an allowance and not a salary. That too is not the due process that should be followed. Action TV reported on the legal advice that has been sent to the Secretary of the subject ministry with regard to this situation. Some of the advice could be viewed as an interpretation of the court ruling regarding this issue. The board of directors of the CEB, who met on the 3rd of this month, are using these so-called interpretations for their advantage. A decision that has been granted by court is effective to the past, present and future. With the court decision that was granted on the 2nd of April coming into effect on that same day, the chairman of the CEB in his letter to the GM of the CEB says until the court order comes into effect, authorize the payment of salaries that were in place until January 2021 and to rectify and address the salary anomalies of all categories of employees, if any, at the next collective agreement salary revision which falls on January 2021. That is clearly neglecting the court order delivered in this regard. Do those at the CEB who create artificial power shortages and play games with the national economy also have the ability to play games with the judiciary? President Secretary, this is over to you.
Another phase to distribute some of the titles was held in Bategama under the auspices of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe.
Some of the titles for 5,000 Samruddhi beneficiaries in the Galle district were distributed.
2 days ago, the Sangha of the three sects made a special and an important statement. We should implement their advice. We can find a solution to the main issue if we promote reconciliation among all religions. I have spoken to the Sangha about forming a religious reconciliation board. The board will neither be appointed by the President nor the Prime Minister. The religious factions will nominate the suitable people. They will be vested with the responsibility of looking into the issues between religions and provide solutions.
The Prime Minister expressed the following views as well.
They will be vested with the responsibility of looking into the issues between religions and providing solutions. Many said that the travel advisories will not be lifted for at least 6 to 12 months. But now what has happened? China, Germany, India, Switzerland, United Kingdom and France lifted the travel advisories on Sri Lanka. There are only a few more left, so I request you to bring down your known people in August. We're discussing about counter-terrorism programs to not let ISIS raise its head. Yesterday I spoke to the groups in the United Nations as well.
Politburo member of the Frontline Socialist Party, Tuminda Nagamo, expressed these views during a media briefing today.
Now everybody is getting ready for the presidential elections first, then for the general elections and provincial council elections. They are all planning on using Zaharan. On one side, they're working for the votes of the Sinhalese community, and then on the other hand, they're working for the votes of the Muslims. Some are fighting to divide the votes equally in two halves. Although they harp on the word extremism, they are the ones who plan on living with the blessings of the so-called extremism. If Wickremesinghe opens his mouth, the only thing that comes out is the Counter-Terrorism Act and nothing else. He's like a parrot released from the US Embassy. He says what the US Ambassador says. If the US Embassy says Counter-Terrorism Act, then Ranil Wickremesinghe will also repeat it. May it be when he talks about a natural disaster, speaking at a funeral, a wedding or at an almsgiving.
The Sunday Times political editor says Aksa Bakar Karyawasam is now a paid employee of the US government.
The Sunday Times today reported that former Sri Lankan diplomat and foreign secretary who allegedly pressured the defence ministry to rush through the acquisition and cross-servicing agreement between Sri Lanka and the United States is now a US federal government employee. The article by the political editor of the paper says Prasad Karyawasam is employed by the US federal government-backed Agency for International Development, a federal entity. The agency's Colombo office has placed him as an advisor to the Parliament of Sri Lanka. The US aid has been periodically helping experts to help parliamentary oversight committees. As reported in the Sunday Times last week, Sri Lanka's ambassador to Germany, engineer Karunasena Hettiarachchi, former defence secretary, told President Maithripala Sirisena on the telephone that Karyawasam pressured him to expedite the ACSA by obtaining cabinet approval. The ACSA was signed on August 4, 2017. This was when he was awaiting observations from the armed forces commanders, at that time expressing strong reservations. Hettiarachchi told President Sirisena another who mounted pressure on him was the then foreign minister. The paper says by virtue of his new US aid appointment, Karyawasam has found his name in the guest list of most Western diplomatic missions in Colombo. It adds that last month he attended a dinner at Jefferson House, the official residence of the US ambassador in Sri Lanka, for former envoy Robert O'Blake.
Farmers of Navagathegama in Putlam, who had no one to share their grief with, shared it with News First, hoping that they would receive some consolation. We bring the griefs of the people before you so that you will direct your attention towards these farmers who toil day in, day out to nourish the country amidst the never-ending battles among politicians.
Puttalam district is also among the districts that were devastated by the Sena caterpillar menace that destroyed corn cultivation in the country several months ago. The corn cultivation of the farmers of Navagattegama Puttalam too had to destroy their cultivation that they worked on with many hopes as it was the only solution. Although the government officials promised that the farmers will be given compensation, it still remains a dream. We were told that compensation would be paid through Agrarian Insurance Board. They are the ones who say that we will not be given a compensation. The farmers are unable to pay the bank loans or eat. These farmers who spent all that they owned for the corn cultivation after a 4-month-long drought are still anticipating a solution from the relevant authorities. We don't ask for aid from the government. We don't ask for employment. The farmers are helpless today. We have not received a single cent.
The religious ceremony to hand over the first Chaitya built under the Sasunata Aruna program was held yesterday at the Satara Ala Sri Swarna Jayanti Viharya in Shravasripura, Anuradhapura.
The construction of this Chaitya began under the Vavai Daga by Gamai Pansalai concept implemented by the Minister of Housing, Construction and Cultural Affairs and the Deputy Leader of United National Party, Sajith Premadasa, in 2018. Chief Prelate of the Asgiri chapter of the Siam sect, Most Venerable Warakakoda Jnana Ratana Thera, Anunayaka of the Malwatu chapter of the Siam sect, Dimbul Kumbure Vimala Dhamma Thera, Chief Incumbent of the Atamasthana, Venerable Pallegama Sirinivasa Thera and several others attended the event. I see the need of an era where leaders do not loot and misuse national property. If the rulers operate on the preferences of the people, that way of governing will be blessed. The rulers should be practitioners of religion. Where there is no religion, there is no public mandate. Where there is no public mandate, very little life is left for a government. If you treat your people the same way you treat your children, a strong country can be created. There are 4 important policies. First is ensuring the safety of the people and all the animals of the country. Second is to eradicate crime. Third is the economic well-being of the people. And finally, paying close attention to all religious leaders. I am at a strong stance to begin a 100 Chaitya project at the second phase, a 1000 Chaitya project on the third phase, and to complete 1125 Chaityas in the coming 3 to 4 years all across the country.
Chaitya Rajanan Mahansela Idikarla is Sasunata Puja Kirime Kartabya.
Former Sports Minister Navendra Sanayak expressed his views regarding recent performance of the Sri Lankan cricket team at the World Cup.
When we are talking about sports, we should speak about cricket. Cricket in our country is in a low state. We won against Afghanistan in a nick of time. We lost the match against New Zealand. The next match will be on Tuesday against Bangladesh. Bangladesh is not an easy team to win. I can remember how 10 years ago former cricket player Aruna De Silva said that they will someday be better than us. It has happened now. There are divisions everywhere. There is no proper leadership. They don't allow leaders as well as good cricketers to rise. The political issues in the cricket board is a different matter. This is actually a sin because we have created many talented cricketers in our country. I think we should remove politics from the sport. If we don't do this now, we will not be able to rectify the errors in the sport.
An event to create awareness about counter-terrorism security for hotels was held in Colombo this morning.
The event was organized by the Hotels Association of Sri Lanka.
We are very confident that the tourism will bounce back in time to come. And hotels need to invest in staff training, that's priority number 1, and the necessary hardware to maintain security at optimal level. Today's session is the first in a series of events planned to educate our members on identifying possible threats and what countermeasures can be taken in hotels to protect life, protect property, and of course, to ensure the safety of our patrons.
While the day-to-day world advances each and every second, the leader of the indigenous people in Sri Lanka feels that the ever-changing world brings with threat to their uniquely preserved culture.
The indigenous people of Sri Lanka, who throughout history were known as the protectors of the wild, now reside within the Madhuroa National Park, which is an area protected by the wildlife authorities. These people who live within the thick forest have not come across any wild elephant related trouble. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said about the ever worsening human-elephant conflict and both human and beast that fall victim to this. The son of Uruwalige Vanilatto, Uruwalige Gunapandialatto, commented on the prevailing human-elephant conflict in the country. When the forest where the elephants live is destroyed, they tend to enter the villages. The elephants turn aggressive because their home is destroyed. Both us and these animals are facing the same tragedy now. We used to live in the forest peacefully. Our freedom in the forest was restricted. I believe the government should put forward a proper plan for the betterment of our generation and the environment. If such a plan is initiated, the human-elephant conflict can be controlled up to a certain level. At least a small part of the environment will be preserved. This is the fate that these indigenous people who hold a great historic as well as cultural importance have to face at present. With the advances of the modern world, it is a question if the culture and language unique to these indigenous people will be preserved for more years to come. Leader of the indigenous people, Uruwalige Vanilatto, said, at present a total population of approximately 500,000 people reside in 62 villages spread across 6 districts. Now the forest has been restricted for us. If we challenge these laws, we will be imprisoned. Due to this, we are unable to follow the footsteps of our ancestors. We are left with the choice of finding jobs and moving to urbanized areas. The youth now tend to find jobs in areas such as Colombo, Kandy, Galle and Mathura. Our youth who tend to move to the city embrace the modern lifestyle, diminishing our unique cultural traits. The way they dress, talk and live change. They tend to dye their hair, wear earrings and totally change. They think that it is attractive. One youth can totally transform our society. When our people see this, they tend to do the same. This is what is happening now. More details of the indigenous youth and their love for cricket on News First tomorrow.